Once upon a time, there was a really big war called World War I. It was terrible. Everyone was sad. But Germany was the saddest of all. They lost the war. They had to pay a lot of money to the winners, like Britain and France. Germany had no money. They were poor. The people were hungry and angry. They needed a hero. But they got an angry man with a silly mustache instead. His name was Adolf Hitler. He was a painter, but he was not very good at painting. He was very good at talking, though. He shouted a lot. He told the German people, "I can fix everything. I will make Germany big and strong again." The people cheered. They liked him. So Hitler became the boss of Germany. He called his group the Nazis. Down in Italy, there was another man. His name was Benito Mussolini. He was bald, and he looked very tough. He wanted Italy to be like the old Roman Empire. He wanted to be a superhero. Mussolini and Hitler looked at each other. They thought, "Hey, we both hate the same people. Let's be friends." So they became best friends. They called themselves the Axis powers. It sounds cool, but they were the bad guys. Japan was watching from far away. Japan wanted to be big and strong, too. Japan had a strong army and a strong navy. But Japan needed oil and metal. They looked at their neighbors in Asia. They thought, "We will just take their stuff." So Japan joined the club with Germany and Italy. Now there were 3 bad guys. Hitler started his plan. He wanted more land for German people. He looked at Austria. It was a nice country next door. Hitler said, "I want that." He sent his soldiers in. Austria did not fight. They let him in. Britain and France watched. They were worried. They did not want another war. They were tired. So they said, "Okay, Hitler, you can have Austria. But please stop now." Hitler said, "Okay, I promise." But Hitler lied. He looked at Czechoslovakia. He said, "I want that too." Britain and France were nervous. They flew to meet Hitler. They signed a piece of paper. It said, "Hitler can have a little bit of land, but then he must stop." The British leader went home. He waved the paper. He said, "Look, we have peace." Everyone was happy. But Hitler was laughing. He took the rest of Czechoslovakia anyway. Britain said, "Hey, you promised." Hitler said, "Oops, sorry, not sorry." Then Hitler looked at Poland. Poland was big. Hitler wanted it. Britain and France finally stood up. They said, "Listen, Adolf, if you touch Poland, we will fight you." Hitler did not care. He had a secret plan. He called the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was Russia. The leader was named Stalin. Stalin had a big mustache, too. Hitler hated Stalin. Stalin hated Hitler. But they made a deal. Hitler said, "Let's attack Poland together. We can share it like a pizza." Stalin said, "Sounds good." On September 1st, 1939, German tanks rolled into Poland. They were very fast. This new way of fighting was called Blitzkrieg. It means lightning war. It was super fast. Poland tried to fight, but Germany came from the west and Russia came from the east. Poland was crushed. Britain and France declared war on Germany. World War II had begun. For a few months, nothing happened. It was quiet. People called it the phony war. It was weird. But then, Hitler woke up. He attacked Denmark and Norway. He took them very quickly. Then he looked at France. France had a big wall of guns and forts on the border. They felt safe. But the Germans were smart. They went around the wall. They went through the forest. The French were surprised. "Sacre bleu!" they shouted. The German tanks drove very fast. They cut the Allied armies in two. The British army was trapped on a beach called Dunkirk. They were stuck. The sea was behind them. The Germans were in front of them. It looked very bad. But then a miracle happened. Britain sent hundreds of little boats, fishing boats, pleasure boats, and lifeboats. They saved the soldiers. They brought them back to England. It was amazing. But France was alone now. The Germans marched into Paris. France gave up. Hitler visited Paris. He took a picture in front of the Eiffel Tower. He looked very smug. Now Britain was all alone. Hitler thought, "They will give up now." But Britain had a new leader. His name was Winston Churchill. He was round and grumpy, and he smoked cigars. He gave great speeches. He said, "We will never surrender." Hitler was angry. He planned to invade Britain, but he needed to destroy the British airplanes first. He sent his airplanes, the Luftwaffe, to bomb England. The British pilots fought back. They were brave. They fought in the sky every day. This was the Battle of Britain. Hitler bombed London. He destroyed many houses. But the British people stayed calm. They drank tea and carried on. Hitler realized he could not win in the sky. He stopped his invasion plan. Britain was safe for now. Hitler got bored. He wanted to fight someone else. He looked at his map. He saw the Soviet Union. Remember his friend Stalin? Well, Hitler never really liked him. Hitler thought, "I want Russia's land. I want their oil." So in June 1941, he did something crazy. He attacked his friend. He sent millions of soldiers into Russia. It was a huge surprise. Stalin was shocked. The Germans moved very fast. They took many cities. They captured millions of Russian soldiers. They got very close to the capital, Moscow. It looked like the end for Russia. But then something happened. The weather changed. It got cold. Very, very cold. Snow fell. The German soldiers did not have warm coats. Their tanks froze. Their guns froze. They were miserable. The Russian soldiers were used to the cold. They had warm fur hats. They fought back. The Germans were stuck in the snow. It was a disaster for Hitler. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Japan was busy. Japan was taking islands and countries in Asia. The United States of America was watching. The USA was not in the war yet. They wanted to stay home. But they stopped selling oil to Japan. Japan was angry. They needed oil for their ships. They decided to attack the USA. On December 7, 1941, Japanese planes flew to Hawaii. The American Navy was there at a place called Pearl Harbor. It was a Sunday morning. The American sailors were sleeping or eating breakfast. Suddenly, bombs fell. Ships sank. Many men died. It was a terrible surprise. Japan thought America would be scared. But America was not scared. America was furious. President Roosevelt said, "This is a day of shame." The USA declared war on Japan. Then Hitler declared war on the USA. Now the whole world was fighting. The USA was very strong. They had many factories. They started making tanks, planes, and ships. They made thousands of them. They sent soldiers to fight in Europe and in the Pacific Ocean. In the Pacific, the Americans fought the Japanese. It was a different kind of war. It was mostly on the water and on small islands. The ships had big battles. They used airplanes that flew off the ships. The most important battle was at Midway. The Americans sank 4 big Japanese ships. It was a huge win. After that, Japan started to lose. The Americans jumped from island to island. They got closer and closer to Japan. Back in Europe, things were going bad for Hitler. The British and Americans were fighting the Germans in North Africa. It was hot and sandy. There were big tank battles in the desert. The British won a big battle at a place called El Alamein. The Germans had to run away. Then the Allies attacked Italy. They landed on the island of Sicily. The Italian people were tired of the war. They were tired of Mussolini. They said, "You are fired." They put Mussolini in prison. Italy surrendered. But the Germans were still there. They fought hard in the mountains of Italy. It was slow and difficult. In Russia, the fighting was terrible. The Germans tried to take a city called Stalingrad. It was named after Stalin, so he did not want to lose it. The battle lasted for months. The city was destroyed. It was just piles of bricks. The soldiers fought in the streets and in the houses. It was freezing cold again. The Russian army surrounded the German army. The Germans had no food. They had no bullets. They had to give up. This was the turning point. After Stalingrad, the Russians started pushing the Germans back. They pushed them all the way out of Russia. They pushed them through Poland. They were marching towards Germany. The German army was running out of men. Now it was time for the big finish. The British and Americans planned a huge attack. They wanted to land in France and free it from the Nazis. They gathered millions of men and thousands of ships in England. On June 6, 1944, they launched the attack. It was called D-Day. The soldiers crossed the sea. They landed on the beaches of Normandy in France. The Germans were waiting. They had big guns on the cliffs. It was scary. Many soldiers died on the beach. But more soldiers kept coming. They broke through the German lines. They started to march towards Paris. The people of France were so happy. They gave the soldiers flowers and wine. Paris was free. Germany was in trouble. The Americans and British were coming from the west. The Russians were coming from the east. Hitler tried one last attack. He sent his tanks through the forest again. It was called the Battle of the Bulge. It was a surprise, but the Americans held strong. They did not break. The Germans ran out of gas for their tanks. They had to walk home. The Allies entered Germany. They found terrible things there. They found camps where the Nazis had hurt many Jewish people and others they did not like. It was very sad. The soldiers saw how evil the Nazis were. They knew they had to win. The Russians reached the capital city, Berlin, first. They fought in the streets. Hitler was hiding in a bunker under the ground. He knew he had lost. His 1,000-year empire lasted only 12 years. On April 30th, 1945, Hitler took his own life. A week later, Germany surrendered. The war in Europe was over. People danced in the streets. They threw parties. But the war was not over yet. Japan was still fighting. The Americans were close to Japan now. They bombed the Japanese cities. The cities were made of wood, so they burned easily. But the Japanese soldiers would not give up. They fought to the death. They even crashed their planes into American ships on purpose. These pilots were called kamikaze. The Americans knew that invading Japan would be very hard. Millions of people might die. The American president had a new weapon. It was a secret. It was the atomic bomb. It was the most powerful bomb ever made. He decided to use it. On August 6, 1945, an American plane dropped one atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. The explosion was huge. It destroyed the whole city in 1 second. A giant mushroom cloud went up into the sky. It was terrifying. But Japan still did not surrender. So 3 days later, America dropped another bomb on the city of Nagasaki. Boom! Another city was gone. Finally, the Emperor of Japan spoke. He said, "The war has not gone very well for us." That was an understatement. Japan surrendered. World War II was finally over. It was the biggest and deadliest war in history. Millions and millions of people died. Cities were destroyed. Europe was a mess. But the bad guys had lost. The dictators were gone. The world was changed forever. The USA and the Soviet Union were the new bosses of the world. They were very strong. But they did not trust each other. They looked at each other with suspicion. A new kind of war was coming. A war without shooting. A Cold War. But that is a story for another time.